Congratulations to all the years and days and so forth. That's great to see. And I tell you, it's a weird feeling being the oldest rat in the barn. It's a strange kind of phenomenon, but yeah, I was the youngest member. As I mentioned a little earlier, I was the youngest member in everything I attended for years. Now I'm almost always the oldest rat in every barn I get in. And I'm the oldest member in oldest male in my state, oldest active male. And so it's amazing how it happens. They from the youngest twerp to the oldest goat. And but I'll take it. I'll take it very, very well. I got some really heartbreaking news. No questions. We're going to, you're being from the South, I talk slow, think slow, react slow, and so we're going to move on and get into a part of the program that I dearly love. We got 2 sessions to go. And tonight, dealing with some of the things we're talking about on relationships, unity, and stuff like that, we're going to be doing that, and we're going to do it through the traditions. And so I want to deal with that at a personal level. Yeah, because it's a phenomenally important thing. I'll just tell you this by way of salesmanship. I probably deliberately use traditions more than I do steps. You know, where I'm going to pull on a tradition and use it for something far more often than steps. You know, steps are how I live. You know, I don't need to pull a step. That's how I live. Traditions, on the other hand, are just tremendously good for handling specific problems. Of all the people that ever contact me, I would say, sometimes be in a town and say something that kind of dawned on somebody after I leave, and they'll call me. And about 90% of the time, it's a tradition issue, not a step issue, because that's the whole business of how you relate to the world around you. So that's what we're going to deal with. And then tomorrow, we'll wrap up with what I think is, you talk about being rocketed into a 4th dimension and into a new phase of existence. We'll be dealing with the part of the program that shifts from me to we and to our real purpose. And so we'll close out on that. And then we'll give the homework assignment. And Alex has agreed to be the stool pigeon for anybody that doesn't take care of it. Then we'll send the gang up here for that. So anyway, that's what we'll take off with on that. And traditions are an extremely important thing to me. I know early on, when I was in the program and I thought AA was just a little covey of drunks that got together every once in a while, tradition were the first thing that gave me vision of what Alcoholics Anonymous was. That is more than just a little gaggle of drunks sitting in the corner of a church basement. Bless you. Now, that's the weakest sneeze I have ever heard. I bet your ears are popping. I would never point that out publicly. But it really did. It gave me a vision that it's not just a little gaggle of folks somewhere, but it really is a program that has Big Mo, and it literally reaches around this world. And it gave me vision. It meant a lot to me. It always has. I use them in every area of my life. Yeah, I mentioned that earlier, and I'll elaborate on it a little bit more. I'm going to talk fast as I can because it's hard to do traditions in a limited amount of time. I better not tell too many war stories. I won't be get there. A while back, I had some people call me from Tennessee, and they were having a district meeting, and they wanted me to come over and do a deal on traditions. And I said, well, I'd be happy to do it. When it happened to be a date, I was going to be in Georgia. And they said, well, isn't there any way you can do it? I said, good God, I don't know. But I knew my schedule in Georgia was that I didn't have anything to do afternoon. And I also checked to see that there was a plane that would get me from Georgia to Tennessee if I could get there on time. So I said, all right, if it's a tradition now, if it had been just wanted to do altar calls or something, I might not have done it. But it's this tradition. I said, let me see what I can do. So we did. Flew into that town in Tennessee, Knoxville, somewhere in Tennessee. And I only got through 6 traditions. And they've been on my case ever since. Now, you got to come back, man. You didn't do your job. We spent all that money getting you over here, and you didn't even finish what you... So anyway, I got to go back to Tennessee and finish jobs. So I'll get at it. I do like to look at tradition from a personal standpoint, and I do use them in everything that I do. I'd give you an example of something that to me is about, common welfare is what the first tradition is about. Our common welfare comes first. Personal recovery depends on a unity. Just like my belief is that the first step is the most important step, because that's the launching pad, that's the foundation, that's where we start, And so it's fundamental to everything else. And it sort of opens the door for the rest of the steps. And the first tradition, same way, that our welfare comes first. If we don't take care of our unity, then we've got nothing for anybody. So we must protect what protects us. And I just give you a couple, one for sure, and then maybe one more if I sneak it in. What that means in real life, what does it mean to me? And I know just from our conversation, many of you are dealing with things that are very much in the fringes of this neighborhood, at least. You gathered by now, I'm sure that I'm a group guy. I'm not a meeting junkie. I'm a group guy. I'm somebody who is committed to a home group. That's where I belong. That's my foundation. It's where I do my most important work. That's my launching pad. And so it's a very important thing to me. And the group I'm in, we started it 14 years ago, the outgrowth of Big Book Workshops, and it's an excellent group. We have all legacies in place. Every service is provided in AA is provided in our group. Every service action is done in AA. It exists, it's staffed, it's functional. So it's a very important kind of a thing to me, a very important place to get well. And it's something I have loyalty to. Now, sometimes I have to be gone. I won't get back tomorrow, Monday night, in time for the meeting. Well, I won't get back till midnight, so I know it won't meet. They'll probably be gone by then, maybe. And so I won't get back. But I'd like to be there as much as I possibly can. And I was out of town on an extended trip for something. And while I was out, our group, in its wisdom, made a decision to do something that was totally unacceptable to me. I'm the great white father, they're not supposed to do that. And, but it did. They made a drastic decision. And the decision was, we have an open speaker meeting once a week, and then on Monday night we have 3 different groups. One of them's open. It's a newcomer group, but it's open to anybody who wants to walk in the door. We have one that's step tradition oriented, and then a book discussion. And while I was away, the decision was made by my home group to discontinue the big book meeting in order to strengthen the step tradition meeting. Well, I about had a baby when I got back, and I'm telling you, I was absolutely. Now I knew that my loyal partners in crime would not do something just because I was gone, and they knew that it might be difficult to do if I was yelling and screaming while they were trying to vote. And so I know they wouldn't do that. They wouldn't take advantage of my absence to vote something in. But they did. And so when they got back, and I heard that, have you ever been just too mad to do something? You ever been so mad that you just didn't trust yourself to do something? That's what I was. And so that Alex won't quit bumming, will he? He's been hustling people for years. Yeah. But when I got that word, I was so angry. It's only our basic text. It's only where we draw our entire program from. It's not like it doesn't matter much. But I was so mad, I knew that if I did anything, I would overdo it. And when you're the oldest rat in the barn, you have to be mindful of the fact that you can do some damage unintentionally. And just not just because you're the oldest rat in the barn, but that helps a great deal. And so when the fearless leader is angry, it sort of reverberates in a deal. And I knew if I did anything quickly, I would do some damage, some real damage. And so I had to bite my tongue and not do anything. I evaluated what my feeling was about. Why am I so angry? Is it because I was insulted, because the fearless leader was not involved in that thing? Was it because I suspected a sneak attack and do it while the old man's gone? You know, and I wanted to evaluate that and assure why I was so upset. Did I really believe that this was injurious to our purpose, to our purpose in our group? Well, when I got through, I finally got resolved that there was absolutely no personal deal there. It did not have to do with me. It had to do with what I truly believe. If we take out the basic text, what else would you take out? Yeah, and so that was just totally unacceptable to me. And so I didn't do anything the first business meeting afterward. I sat there, held my peace, and I never discussed it with a soul, except my sponsor, my higher power, and me. I didn't discuss it with anybody else, nobody. And so I bit my tongue on the first meeting. Second business meeting, I'm still too mad and didn't trust myself. And then third business meeting, I wasn't sure I'd do anything or not, but right before the end of the meeting, it was in a regular meeting. I stuck my hand up to say something, and I said, a while back, we made a decision. Now I say we because that's my home group. If I'm not there, my vote is exactly what they vote, because it's we. You know, it's not. I don't stand apart from that. So I said we made a decision a while back to fix something that I don't think was broken, and I'd like to request that we reinstate the big book groups starting tonight. And a hush fell over the crowd, and you could have heard a pin drop. And there was that electric moment where one guy asked one simple little question, and we handled that, moved on, unanimously voted to reinstate it. Now just think about that. See, if I hadn't been thinking about the common welfare and I just been thinking about me and my feelings, I could have done a lot of damage. So when I talk about common welfare, I either mean it or I don't. And if I don't take care of that group, it can't take care of me. And so that's what I have to do, that the we is bigger than the me. And so that was as tough a test as I've had for a good while to deal with common welfare in a way that was extremely important to me. And so sometimes, you know, that's what it is, if I have to get beyond myself. And that's what the common welfare is about. If it isn't good for the total, it's probably not good for me. And so that's what that tradition is about. It's about assuring that we're looking after the common welfare. I'll wait on to another one on another aspect, another wrinkle on that. But to me, that's a very, very fundamental thing. It's like the first step opens the door to every other step. The first tradition opens the door to every other tradition, because they're basically saying, here's how we protect our welfare. And it'll enumerate the things we go at. So that's fundamental to me. The second one is, good God, don't tell me if we got here, that somebody recite it for me, Pete.
For our group purpose,
I'm getting brain dead. For our group purpose, there is but one ultimate authority, loving God as He may express Himself in our group conscience. And that's all of these traditions are very important. That's certainly one. For our group purpose, what is our group purpose? It'll define it a little later on. For our group purpose, we only have one purpose, and that's to carry the message to the alcoholic still suffers. That's what we're about. And for that purpose, there's only one ultimate authority. And it's certainly not the oldest rat in the barn. It's God as we understand Him, expressed through the group conscience. And that's what happened in that meeting, I think, at that time. But you know, I personally think the term group conscience is used inappropriately in our fellowship far too often. I've heard it here this weekend, where we refer to a business meeting as a group conscience. That's not a group conscience. You know, a business meeting is not that. That's taking care of business. It's taking care of the routine stuff. We need coffee, we need something, somebody going to get the key, whatever. But that's just routine, take care of business. And so group conscience goes beyond that. Group conscience is prayerful consideration. Like I was doing that individually, dealing with that issue. And I think the group probably did that very quickly when I raised the issue. And so for that purpose, there's only one ultimate authority, as expressed in the group conscience. What does that mean in real life? In looking at an issue that has real impact on our purpose needs to go to a group conscience. I'll give you an example. We just did a thing that, the thing of reimbursing people for expenses was it's an ongoing issue that we have in the fellowship. I went for 25 years and would never accept reimbursement for, like if I did a service job at GSR, DCM, something like that. I would never take reimbursement for my expenses. And one day it dawned on me, after about 25 years, that I was not being generous. What I was doing was being very selfish. And what I'm doing was denying my fellow members the right of participation. The heroes taking care of everything. Now, I didn't intend that. There was no malicious intent. My gratitude was deep, and I thought I was doing that. But everybody else's gratitude's deep, too. And so what I'm doing was depriving those folk of the right of participation, and I don't have the right to do that. First time I ever took a check for reimbursement, I swear to God, I had to back up to take the check from this little gal that was writing. And I felt like a fool. But I knew it was the right thing. Now, that was a personal conscience. We had a deal that I read into a thing. It's, like you probably don't see this in Canada, but we had extremely high fuel costs. And I can tell by looking at the tanks, it's contagious because y'all have caught it too. But it's bad news. And I drove somewhere to an adjoining state to just speak at an anniversary. Now, I didn't pay no attention to that. But for some reason, I don't know, I guess I just had it on my mind. So I went to that thing, and it was an eating meeting. Folks brought in stuff, and all that kind of thing. And I spent $82 going from my home to that meeting and back. I spent $82. The other people in the group put $1 or $2 in the plate. And I thought, come on now. There's something wrong with that picture. That self-support means more than what I put in. It also has to do with my taking away somebody's responsibility. And so when I bother to accept the weight and carry, I pay $82 and they pay $1 or $2. I'm not being fair to that group. I'm not letting them have the responsibility that they have. And so I had that on my mind a little bit. I never did say anything to that group because that was all history. And it was all right. It's not going to break me. It wasn't the money anyway. There's a principle involved in that called self-support. And when I got back to my group, I thought, now we are a group that's pretty well organized. We have speaker meetings every Thursday night, and we don't just take who we can get, not who's readily available. We look for speakers. We want diversity. We want people of different persuasions. We want people of different colors. We don't want everybody to be handsome like me. We want some ugly people up there. I mean, it looks like real drunks, So we want a variety of people. We want our speakers to look like America. We want to be a representative sheriff. So we don't just take who's available, we take who we want. We have it set up so that we want to have a local speaker one time a month because we want to be good neighbors to our friends. We want female, we want gay, we want straight, you name it, whatever. And so when you do that, there's going to be travel involved. And my little experience up there with that $82 made me more sensitive to that. I was thinking about it. I thought, we're not being self-supporting. We ask somebody to spend $100 to come speak at our meeting. There's no self-support in that. That's called using people, is what that is. And so I brought that up at a business meeting and said, I was real proud of my group. I was really proud of them because there was a lot of reluctance to get into that reimbursing folk. They understood the principle. But my group is extremely, proud's the wrong word. They feel very strongly about our support of AA services at all levels. You know, we contribute every 3 months. We go broke by design. We spend every bit of money we have. You know, we take care of our fundamental expenses. We have a prudent reserve in there. Everything beyond that, we break out 4 different ways. We contribute equal amounts to our local intergroup, our district, our area functions that take in our state, and our national, which takes in the General Service Office. So we routinely do that. We don't have to make a decision. It is a decision. And so we do that every time. And my group's reluctance was they didn't want to lower the level of our contribution. And I was really proud of our bunch for that. But at the same time, we're either going to continue using people or we're not. We're going to be self-supporting by paying our way or we're not. And that was a weighty group conscience issue. And we finally wound up getting an ad hoc committee to go to the tedious detail, bring back a recommendation. And they did. And so we came back with something, and we now do that as a matter of course. And that's the deal, you know, that's what does a group operate on? And when it's a real issue, that is the prayerful consideration. That's what a group conscience is. It's prayerful consideration of a matter that would affect our purpose, eh? And that's what it is. And so it's a vitally thing. Leaders are but trusted servants. They don't govern. We have leaders. A number of leaders stood up in this group tonight. Now, everyone just stood up right then. Oh, he's quitting. He's not. I heard he's a leader. He's leaving. Oh. Well, as much as I drink, you think I know how to open a bottle. But leaders, I'll let you in on a little secret that it's just my secret, but I believe that anybody, I just pick a number, anybody over 5 years sober is a leader. I don't care whether you want to be or not. Don't care whether you even agree to it or not. You are. Well, who do new people look to, eh? You're not going to look to somebody that's got 5 days, are you? You're going to look to somebody that's got just some time. So they're a proven commodity. And you're going to be able to trust that they're going to not just get out and get drunk, talk about you. And so at least we'll talk about you after you're in the program. But yeah, that's who you look to, eh? Yeah, that you got to look, and so leaders don't have to be barking commands. It's a matter of the role that you demonstrate. It's a role of how do you carry out yours. That's where people learn from by watching what you do. I was at an area assembly one time, and if you've done any of that, you know that we make an art out of voting. I swear to God, we can vote something to death. And I was in one of those one time, and we were voting on some really a no-brainer kind of an issue. And we were voting over and over and over. And I just got tired of it. I did a little quick nose count, and I saw that sucker wasn't going anywhere. So I switched my vote. I'd been voting for it. I voted against it. Now, I couldn't have told you how anybody else in that group voted. I bet you I had 25 or 30 people ask me why I changed my vote. That's what leadership is. Yeah, you don't have to bark commands. It's just people watch what you do. And then they're going to emulate that if they believe that you practice what you preach. You know, they're going to follow it. So there's a leadership deal that's there. You don't have to run for it. It just comes with the territory. That's my belief. Doesn't make it true. And but very important that we do have leaders. We have to have leaders. Otherwise, we're just a crowd. So you got to have leadership. You know, and that's what we do. Rotating leadership. We don't let people camp on offices forever. You know, that we rotate that. And And the third one is one we talked about a little bit earlier with Singleness of Purpose, that the only requirement for membership is a desire to stop drinking. The short form, the long form goes further, and it says, any, quote that thing, somebody. I need to read it, John.
Any 2 or 3 alcoholics gathered together can call themselves an AA group so long as they have no other affiliation.
2 or more. Now, I don't mean to correct my helper, but it was 2 or more. Well, 3 is more. Yeah, 2 or more. Yes, that's all it takes. They gathered for the purpose of recovery, may call themselves an AA group, provided they have no other affiliation. And what that means is that, say, if we wanted to go out here in the parking lot and start a move to have meetings about anti-retreats, we could do that. We could do that. We're free to do it. Anybody could do it. It's a simple thing. And that the only requirement for membership, what's the quote in there about that people who suffer, is open to people who suffer from alcoholism? The long form of the tradition. I wish I had one I could see, because my eyes are.
I can't see it without my
Yeah. Well, your older brother's got the glasses. You got to go to a young guy. There you go.
Hence, we may refuse none who wish to recover. Nor ought AA membership ever depend upon money or conformity. Any 2 or 3 alcoholics gathered together for sobriety may call themselves an AA group, provided that, as a group, they have no other affiliation.
Read the first 2 sentences one more time.
Our membership ought to include all who suffer from alcoholism. Hence, we may refuse none who wish to recover.
Yeah. And that's a whole different language than what's said in the short form. The only requirement members desire to stop drinking. It's a whole different language. It ought to include all suffer from alcoholism. It doesn't matter what else. The first real issue about Singleness of Purpose was when the first gay person came in. And there was a real brouhaha among those early pioneers about whether they should be allowed. And that's where that came from. It doesn't matter what else you bring. If you have alcoholism, you're in the right place. And so that's the, and I think we really give it a cheap shot when we say the only requirements. Yeah, I got a golden retriever that has the desire to stop drinking. Never has had a drink, but he wants to quit before he starts. I offered him some one time. He wouldn't take it. So, not a real dog. But anyway, that one is one that gets booted around, kicked around a great deal. And it's one that I always like to kind of underline that a little bit, because it is such a widespread, prevalent kind of a concern in the fellowship. And so this is the baseline for that kind of thing. Fourth one is about autonomy. That each group should be autonomous except in matters affecting other groups or AA as a whole. I like to break it down, as you've gathered by now, to personal. Every one of us in this room is entitled to autonomy. Every member is entitled to autonomy. Every one of us. That we can AA any way we want to, provided it doesn't interfere with somebody else's right to do the same thing. And it's a kind of a tricky thing. Like, I don't have the right, because I get the privilege of speaking, I don't have the right to get up here and use gutter language. I don't have that right. I don't have that right to impose that on what may be a highly spiritual moment for you. And I'm abusing my license to do something when I start doing that. I'll tell you one reason that's important. Well, it's important to me just because in general. But what it looks like in real life. I was over in Tennessee speaking at a conference one night, one weekend. And the guy who spoke on Saturday night, I'd never seen him before or since, but he thought he was supposed to do a stand-up comedy act. Now, our counter tonight did a great job of doing that, a very enjoyable countdown. Sometimes they're painful, but that was well done. Good fun. And that is good, clean fun, eh? Well, this guy thought he was supposed to be funny. He sounded like a Las Vegas comic, if you've been there and enjoyed that special thrill. that the poor guy was not funny. I mean, in no way. He tried hard. I swear to God, he tried. He threw out everything he had. And you know how it is when you're just sinking. You know you're going down, and you paddle harder. And that's what he was. And the more he was sinking, the worse he got. And I swear to God, that was the most absolutely worthless, insulting, inappropriate talk I'd ever heard, and I've heard a bunch of them. But I'm sitting there with my wife. She doesn't hear that from me. I sure don't want her hearing it from some clown in Tennessee. No way. That's not what we're there for. And so I didn't like it personally. But now I was mild compared to the two people sitting right in front of me. One of them was the poor person who invited the speakers. And all the time he's talking, I could see her just squirming. And the guy sitting beside her, I assume was her husband, it was fascinating. I was watching his neck. You ever seen a thermometer go up, And then you could see the red going up in his neck. His ears started glowing. And I said, I don't think he's having a good time. And so after that guy finally gave up, he didn't quit, he just gave up. So I saw that lady that was there, and I said, it looked like your friend you were sitting with didn't really enjoy the meeting tonight. And she said, Tom, you will never know how absolutely mortified I was at that whole deal. Yeah, I have never been more embarrassed in my life. The man sitting with her was her minister at the first meeting of AA he had ever attended. And I'll guarantee you it was the last meeting of AA he ever attended. You think about that. That's more than just purist virtues. That's a matter of just common sense, of common decency. Here's a guy that will impact more alcoholics in the next year than any of us will come close to doing. And I'll guarantee you that boy would recommend an alcoholic to go to hell quicker than he would to AA. See, what a disservice, where somebody has taken a license to just sort of shoot off at the mouth. And in the course of it, how much damage is done. And so it's not a matter of prudishness or anything like that. My God, I can laugh with folks anyway. But when you're speaking as an example of Alcoholics Anonymous, I think it's awfully important to carry yourself like a good example and not somebody that's just sort of smoking and joking. You run into that a fair amount. I took a guy to the prison a while back. Matter of fact, that guy I was talking about that was 32 years and got sober, and I'd been wrestling with him. Took him to the prison. Told him he'd go over and speak to the guys. That'd be one way to sort of get his feet wet. So he went in. We meet in a beautiful little chapel. Great place. And this guy made his talk, and, well, the guy spoke, let me put it that way. And he laced it with profanity in a chapel. And we don't do that in that group, And so we got through. It's all I could do to keep from just putting a stage hook on him and bringing him down. But I just hated to do that. I said, well, we can tolerate it. So we're riding home, and he said, well, what do you think? How'd it go? I said, well, it went okay, but you'd have been a whole lot better off had you not put all that profanity in it. And he said, well, I just wanted the guys to know that I was not some big shot, that I was able to operate at the same level. I said, what you just did was insult a whole room full of people, because what you communicated is what you think of them. And what you're doing is taking guys, they got 168 hours in their week just like we do. They got 1 hour of decency where they can come in and expect to have some sane spiritual stuff. And then somebody come in there and contaminate it with that. It was a great disservice. And he said, my God, I never thought of that. I said, well, I didn't think you did. But you see what I'm talking about. Sometimes in that sort of a loosening and not thinking about the impact of what you're doing, you're carrying a message, not entertaining. You're carrying a message of hope to people. And so you can negate the value so easily like that. And so that's not a matter of being goody two-shoes. It's a matter of being concerned about carrying a message that has meaning and some depth to it. And so I think about that. And the autonomy, I have the right to practice any way I want to, but not at your expense. You've got the right to practice it too, and I can't impose my values on you. And so I like to keep that in mind, in that autonomy. That and my group is autonomous. We're free to operate as we wish, and so are the groups next door or anywhere else. That each one of them is a freestanding entity. But we have to be careful, and that's the caution in there, that we not exaggerate our importance in the scene, that we're a good neighbor, that we want to be a good neighbor in our AA community. We have to be careful of that because, very, very honestly, my group contributes more per quarter than our entire district combined. And we don't plan to do that. We're not competing, but we contribute what we believe is our fair share. I don't think you would be amazed, but just in case you'd be amazed, I'll tell you that contributions are pitiful at best. They're pitiful at best. And it's amazing how many groups contribute zilch. Absolutely nothing. So you got a pretty one-dimensional program, eh? And so, but just because we do that, we don't want to lord that over and hold that up as some real banner of achievement or something. We're doing what we believe is right, but we have to be careful that we don't taunt anybody with that. That's just a matter of fact. We always do it. All we got to do is look at the minutes. And so, part of the deal. And the fifth one that tells us what our job is. Each group has but one primary purpose: carry its message to the alcoholic still suffers. I like to look at it, each member has but one primary purpose. Old Tom I has one primary purpose, and that is to carry whatever message I might have to anybody that'll bother to listen. That's my job. That's my primary purpose. I have a lot of other purposes, but that's my primary. And that's always on my mind when I get an opportunity. I do it on airplanes, spend half my life on them. And I take full advantage of the opportunity. I watch to see who's drinking the most. And if you fly first class, it's free hooch, so most everybody will drink. And if they don't drink, I'm thinking they might be part of my clan. So I kind of watch that. But anyway, that's my purpose. That's what I'm about. And like any other human, I got a lot of things that make up my life, but that's my primary thing. That's what I'm really about. I've been given a brand new life, and the only condition is that I share it with the next person. I'm not going to be selfish enough to think that it was intended just for me to enjoy. I think it was given to me so that I could share it with other people. The sixth one is you don't sound like it, but I'm racing. This is about as fast as I can go. The sixth one is about stuff. Where's the reader? Right here, sixth one.
Problems of money, property, and authority may easily divert us from our primary spiritual aim. We think, therefore, that any considerable property of genuine use to AA should be separately incorporated and managed, thus dividing the material from the spiritual. An AA group, as such, should never go into business. Secondary aids to AA, such as clubs or hospitals, which require much property or administration, ought to be incorporated and so set apart that, if necessary, they can be freely discarded by the groups. Hence, such facilities ought not to use the AA name. Their management should be the sole responsibility of those people who financially support them.
Yeah.
For clubs, AA managers are usually preferred, but hospitals, as well as other places of recuperation, ought to be well outside AA and medically supervised. While an AA group may cooperate with anyone, such cooperation ought never go so far as affiliation or endorsement, actual or implied. An AA group can bind itself to no one.
Thank you. Now, that's the long form. Long form is considerably shorter. If you do another one, do the short form because it'll make the point and but that's a wordy kind of a statement there. But and all it's saying is that we've got to stick to our knitting. You know, we don't want to get into owning property prestige because you wind up with it owning us. And you know, I see a lot of traveling around some, you see an awful lot of people who tap dance around that thing. God knows how many groups I know around the country that, I'll just give you one example of 1,000. That a group down near me, there's some, well, may not, I don't know in Canada, but in our country, there's federal money available sometime to enrich sort of community resources and stuff like that. Some alcoholics are kind of crafty. And so they saw an opportunity to get funding provided they put something else in the same building. And so they started developing what they call a community building. And it's nothing in the world except a subsidized building that's owned by AAs and paid for by the government. Well, you couldn't get more out of whack with that tradition, with that. Yeah. It takes all of that responsibility away, and we wind up owned by officialdom. And so they called me and wanted me to come down and speak at the meeting. And I said, okay, I'll come down. They said, yeah, by the way, we want to show you our new club. And I said, well, I'll take a look at your club, but please don't tell me where you got it. Because I may get arrested as an accomplice in where you got it. And so I went down and looked at the stuff, nice thing, but I didn't feel good being there. Yeah, because it's just exactly what that is, where money and property pulls us off course. Let me put that in a little bit of a human context, from a personal aspect. I have to be off. Remember that story I was telling about the guy with the Jaguar? Yeah, who you suppose owned who with that Jaguar? Yeah, that guy was sold his soul, getting this kind of sort of visual affirmation of himself, I guess. But whatever it was. I'll give you an example of what it could do to a human being. I'll give you two real quick ones. Had a guy call me one day and told me I had agreed to speak at his anniversary down in an adjoining state, and I swear I didn't remember it. And so he said, "Well, you told me you'd come." And I said, "Did you have a date?" He said, "No, but you told me." I said, "Well, my God, man, I didn't give you my calendar and say just pick a date. You got to have a date, and see what we do." So he told me the date, and I said, "No, I'm sorry, I can't do it. And I've already got a commitment." Now, the commitment I had was to my son. Now, that's a commitment. Yeah, that was a very important commitment. He was in that little old thing, where you build a little old car, kind of a thing, where the father builds the car and the son takes the credit. That's about the way it works. And so he had one, and I said, "If you make the state finals, I'll go with you." Well, that was my commitment. He made the state finals, and I told him I was going. So I told the guy. Now, this guy was a kind of a high roller type fella. He was in the not wrestling cows. He was in the cow selling business and doing rather well. And so I told him, I said, "No, I'm sorry, I can't do it." He said, "But you said you'd come." I said, "Yeah, but I didn't give you my life. You pick a day to come, I'll be glad to do it. But otherwise, I can't do it. I've got a commitment." And he said, "Well, let me check it a little bit." Yeah. He wouldn't give up. He had to have who he wanted when he wanted them. And so he called me back in a little while. And he said, "Can you be at," and I told him, I said, I can't be back before 6 in the evening because I've got to travel to do. He said, "Can you be at the Southern Pines Airport at 6 p.m.? I said, "Yeah, I can." He said, "Great. Come on down and be ready to travel because we're going down to that state." This was before 9/11. And I got to the airport, of course, small airport, everybody knows everybody. And so when I got there, they didn't have all this security like we do now, and they already had the door open. It looked like they were escorting the president to the helicopter. They over there, and I'm running through there to get to the helicopter. That's what he's got parked, is a helicopter, running. I said, "My God, I didn't sign up for this kind of stuff. Man, I'm supposed to just be sober and happy. I'm not supposed to be riding that stupid thing." So I got on it. And I rattled all the way to down in Lorient, South Carolina. Thought we'd never get there. It was like riding a pogo stick, for God's sake. It just when I got, thank you so much. Well, we're talking about this being sacrifice and giving stuff. You didn't hear that part. Yeah, but we got down there. When I got off that thing, I was shaking. I got right straight to the podium, and I was shaking the podium, and I still had got the thing. So got through with it. And next morning, I'm headed back. So we go back and get the helicopter, took off, and all at once he banged down on the ground. I said, "Why'd you slam dunk this thing?" He said, "I didn't slam dunk it. We crashed." I said, "God knows, man. I think I'm ever going to get out of here." So he borrowed another plane, flew me, and I finally got there. When he got off, he handed me an envelope, and I said, "What's that?" He said, "Just a thank you card. We appreciate you coming down." I said, "Okay, fine." Put it in my pocket, got home, opened it up, had a wad of money in it. So I called him immediately, and I said, "Big guy, you just made a bad mistake." He said, "What?" I said, "You put a bunch of money in my pocket, and we don't do that." He said, No. He said, "That's all right. We can afford that thing. That's what we want to do." And I said, "No, we don't do that. I'm not a hooker. I'm not for sale. I don't rent out. That's not what this is about." I said, "Don't you tell me where to send this back, and don't you ever do that to anybody else in AA, me especially. Because what he's doing, if I'd have taken that, I would have been for sale. And that's not what we do. We give it away. We don't sell it, for God's sakes." And that guy, and by the way, that was his 3rd anniversary. He had to have it his way. And unfortunately, it was his last anniversary because he died drunk real shortly after that. And it stood to reason, that you can't have it on those terms. I'll tell you one other one that really brought it home to me was I had a 12-step call one night, and it was to the high rent district. I live right next door to a place called Pinehurst, which is our Pebble Beach. It's a real fancy golf resort, and I knew the area. And so he called me, and he lived on Millionaire Road. And so I knew I was going into the high rent district. Got a guy sponsored to come on, go with me. So went in, and just tell you what money will do. He answered the door, and he had on a smoking jacket. I'd never seen one except in the movies. And he's wearing a smoking jacket. And I said, "Well, this is going to be good." Now I said, "Go ahead." He got Sinatra playing on the sound system. And so he said, "You want me to turn that off?" I said, "No, I like Old Blue Eyes. Just let him finish that song." And he finished it and cut it off. And he said, he was ready. He said, "Oh, I'm looking at you just because you read. I'm punishing you for reading that long for him." He said, "Would you like me to tell you about myself?" I said, "Yeah, that'd be interesting. I'd love to hear it." He said, "Well, I'll tell you this. The last person," he said, "I just got out of treatment just a while back. They ripped me off for $30,000. I said, "Well, sometimes it's expensive." And he said, "The last guy that did what you and this fellow are doing ripped me off for $300,000. I said, "Well, life's tough." And and then there's one other one he mentioned that was just an outlandish kind of a thing. Well, he'd already told me enough. I understood what he was talking about. That this was a guy. Now he was the owner of an international corporation. He was not a high roller. He was a mega roller, and so he's telling me all of this stuff that he had. Every time he mentioned it, he mentioned a ripoff that came with it. That money just screwed up whatever the transaction was. And he said, "You can tell I'm not a rookie. I've been through this before." And he said, "I've talked to every expert in the United States and some other countries. What do you suppose you can tell me that I don't already know?" And I said, "Well, probably nothing." I said, "But let me just tell you one thing that I want you to know. Me and this fella wouldn't sell you 30 minutes of our time for $300,000. It ain't for sale, buddy. It ain't for sale." And that old boy just quieted right down. that somehow you're given what you need to say. That, man, you don't buy this. It ain't for sale. You got to give up for it to happen. And from that point on, we had a pretty doggone good session. He wound up coming into the program. He died 11 years later with complete sobriety. But see what I'm talking about? What money can do. This guy had himself imprisoned in a mansion with God. It was a pitiful thing. I ran into him in the DFW, the Dallas airport one time. I'm going to Jockstrap, Arkansas, or somewhere to tote the message and do God's work. And I said, "Where are you guys going?" Him and his wife. He said, "Well, we thought we'd go down to Acapulco for a few days." And I said, "You poor baby. I don't know how in the world you stand that." But it's just great. To me, it makes the point that when you get money in it, what you do is screw it up, and you become owned by that. He's imprisoned with his own richness. And what a tragic thing to see that happen. And it can happen so easily when we start getting that mixed up, and we get to thinking that we can buy our way through, and because we got a few bucks, we can buy a little better piece of cake or something. And so I could give you 50 examples of that kind of thing, but you see the point. That when we get owning buildings, the buildings own us. If you go down, I'm far enough away that I can say this without fear of retaliation. Texas is really famous for this thing. Every little old town's got a building, either that they own or it's one that they rent or something there. And typically, not only in Texas, but about anywhere where you see where people have got a building, you'll wind up having about 30 meetings a week. What do you think their primary purpose is? You better believe it. You better believe it. If you start paying rent for downtown property, it takes a whole bunch of collections to do that. Your primary purpose gets totally shifted out of whack, eh? And so, anyway, that whole business of what can happen, where we own stuff, and instead of us, we owning it, it owns us. You've seen it. My God, you've seen it. Where people are just identified by what they have instead of who they are. And so that's what can so easily happen to us, where we get carried away with that. We're going to impress somebody so much that we lose our way in the process. 7 is the antithesis of that. It's about being self-supporting. That each group should be self-supporting except in fully self-supporting. What?
Every AA group ought to be fully self-supporting, declining.
That's the exception. I'm brain dead here. I think Canada got to me or something. But that's, except matters. You know what that means to me, and hopefully to you, is that when I go into an AA meeting, I want to, Joe, I want to contribute at least as much as I consume. That's my criteria. You know, that if I'm going to drink some coffee, I know what coffee costs. If I enjoy the air conditioning, I know what air conditioning costs. We all do. And so I want to just sort of do a rough calculation and make sure that I pay my proportionate share. Now, that's a guess, of course. But the spirit of it is that I don't want to freeload. I don't want somebody else to have to pay my way. You know, I want to carry my weight and be self-supporting. And not everybody can. Sometimes you have to contribute just by pitching in and helping with the work. There are many ways to contribute. Money's not the only way. But as long as I start paying my way, then I'm not going to feel like I'm still hoodwinking people like I made a career of doing. That I carry my weight. I want to take my fair share of that. So that whole business of self-support is so critical. We lose a lot of people over getting tangled up with money matters. And so that tradition is pretty important. 8 is about kind of following up on that business that you don't sell it. That number 8, that short form on it.
Alcoholics Anonymous should remain forever non-professional, but as service centers may employ special workers.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's good. Yeah, it's basically saying that we don't hire out, just like I was telling that guy. But it's just a tricky thing, you know, that like a lot of people who get into recovery wind up working in the treatment field, and it can do good work. It's tricky work. It is really tricky work because what the difficulty is this thing of separating one from the other. I had a woman call me that, I've known her for years, but we weren't close friends or anything. She called me and asked me to go to lunch with her on her. Well, I couldn't turn that down. So I want her to be self-supporting. so I went, and I knew she had something on her mind. She wouldn't have called me otherwise. So I went over, and she, you tell people got something on their mind. She said, Tom, you're still real active in AA, aren't you? And I said, yeah, I'm still active. My God, yes. And I said, aren't you? Like I didn't know. She hadn't been to a meeting for probably 15 years. But I said, aren't you? And she said, well, no. And I said, why not? She said, and this is a sad comment, she said, I gave at the office. How far off base could you get? You don't give at the office, you sell at the office. You don't give. And, you may give a little labor, but you get well compensated for it as a rule. And she was well compensated. But see what it does, it takes away that sense of really being somebody who is a genuine member of AA and gets sold out for that. And a lot of people do that thing of just, like I sponsor a number of people who work in the treatment field. And there are two basic things I look for with people who work in the treatment field. One is if they get up to speak and they make a treatment lecture, then you can tell the difference. You don't need anybody to tell you what it is. You'll recognize it immediately. And when I hear that, if it's somebody that I sponsor, we're going to have a talk. We're going to have a talk. Or at a discussion where they get into counseling instead of sharing. Yeah. And those are the kind of things that will just sort of erode your integrity in the field. So it's a tricky kind of a deal. And sometimes pretty subtle, too. I had a guy call me, how are we doing, Simon? I never have changed my clock. Well, all right, so we are. All right, well, I'm hurrying. Hey, God knows I keep forgetting about that. Jesus, you guys are rich, man. You got clocks everywhere. I had a guy that was an attorney that I'd worked with a lot, trying to help him, and he was just a hard-headed, meathead guy. He was a real good athlete. He played football at Duke University and baseball. He holds the all-time Atlantic, you could look it up if you want to, but holds the all-time Atlantic Coast Conference record for times at bat without a strikeout. That is typical kind of athlete, a real hard-driving athlete, aggressive sort of guy. I intervened on him personally one time, went into his office and just took him out. And I said, that sucker's liable to knock me out before I get out of there, but I'm going anyway. So I went in there and worked on him. Didn't work. Kept me busy. It kept me off the street while I was wrestling with him. And so I had a history with him. Been sober a few times. And I got a phone call for him one day. I know it was a hard phone call for him to make. And he said, Tom, I need a little help. That was hard for him to say. I need a little help. And I said, what might that be? And he said, well, I was in your town a while back, and I jumped town with a hotel bill unpaid. And he said, those cheapskates are going to prosecute me, and I'm going to have to go to court, and they're going to put me in jail. I said, well, it ain't as bad as it sounds. I've been there myself. But there was no sale. He said, no, man, I can't go down to the lawyer. They'll kill me. And so I said, where is it? And he told me. And I said, well, okay, I'll take care of it. And so I did. I went over. He said, now I got to have a receipt, because if I don't have a receipt, man, I'm gone. So I said, okay, I'll get it to you. So I went over, paid the bill, and got that. And he said, I will pay you back because I'm selling my car, and as soon as I get that money, you'll be paid back. I said, don't worry about it, for God's sakes, man, you're worth a few bucks. And so don't worry about it. I'm not. And he said, no, I want to pay you. I said, well, fine. So a little later, now listen to the subtlety of this. This is what a crafty lawyer will do. He sent me a check for the amount plus $5. Is that cagey or what? You know a better way to negate a gift? That's like tipping a waiter. And And I very carefully placed that back in the envelope and said, "You're probably a good lawyer, but your math stinks. Do something appropriate with that." So I set it back. But you see, a simple little thing like that, eh? And he probably didn't think about that, but that would negate the value. That way he could push it off. That those AAs don't care about a guy like me. But he couldn't say that, that I wouldn't, if I'm for sale, it's surely not for $5. And so, but anyway, just a sneaky thing about that whole business. And like that guy the one I was telling with the helicopter. Had I taken that money, that would have paid for everything. That would have been, he didn't have any obligation, no appreciation to anybody. He'd hired somebody to come in and be an out-of-town entertainer. And so just sneaky kind of stuff like that. And so that thing of being careful, if I take 1 cent for anything I do, I'm a professional. I may be underpaid, but I'm a professional if I take any money for anything I do at AA. That's tricky because, I travel a great deal, and just like coming here, there's considerable expense to fly some drunk not halfway, all the way across the country, particularly into Vancouver. Man, they think this is precious land, and they have a bonus payment due for landing on the cherished soil. So it's a lot of it. And I had to be careful with that. If I didn't take reimbursement for expenditures, I would be sponsoring the workshop, and that's a little out of whack. And so that's what we do. We pay our way, with whatever it takes, and that can be a tricky kind of a train sometimes. And so that whole business of money and how we handle it. Oh, I wanted to tell you one other thing. If I just jump back for a minute to that 7, I'll tell you just one little quick story on that thing about how valuable it is. I mentioned that group I sponsor in the prison. When we started to set that group up, we had a meeting with the warden and all the staff there, just sort of going over the ground rules, what we're going to do. And in the course of it, I said, we would like for this group to be self-supporting as much as possible, meaning we don't want anything from the state provided to that group. We want that to be a group of Alcoholics Anonymous. And the warden said, we knew each other, he said, "Tom, these guys don't have any money." I said, "Don't kid yourself, man. Some of them got more money than me and you put together. But now most of them don't." That's right. Most don't. I said, "But can you imagine how much dignity you can buy for 50 cents if that's about all if that's about all you have?" He was just quiet for a minute. He said, "I see what you mean." So right today, that group of guys, that's probably the thing they have the greatest pride in is the fact they're self-supporting. We do a little program for new arrivals where some guys from the group go in and tell them about the group. One of the things they always say, at the end of our meetings, we have refreshments. We'll have coffee and pop, stuff like that. And they always say, and you can believe this prison and this state has absolutely nothing to do with providing that. We buy that stuff. We're self-supporting. It's great to see them hustling. They start trying to beat something out of people. Great to see. But what they're doing is learning the principles. They're learning the principles in that. And so, and the other story, I just mentioned that, but no extra charge, but I'm going to throw in one more. I was out in California. A guy called me I didn't know him, but he called me from somewhere out on the coast. And he wanted me to come to a town and to speak to a gathering of the AAs in 3 cities. And I said, "That's fine with me. I'll be glad to do it. The date's open, and I'll be glad to do it." And he said, "Now, while you're here, we would also like for you to speak at a penitentiary." And I said, "I'll be glad to do it." And I said, "I hate to tell you, but that'll probably be the feature for me." He said, "Well, me too, but we won't announce that. We'll just have the regular meeting." So I went over to that. Well, I got a deal in the mail that was from the federal penitentiary at that place in California. And I opened the letter, and I couldn't figure why they were writing to me, maybe clearance or whatever, I didn't know what, but I opened it up. And there were, I guess you call it a voucher or something. It's a deal saying, it named a figure and said, expenses for a speaker. I took a look at that thing, and I said, come on, man, you got to be kidding me. And so I called the guy, and I said, look, buddy, it's been a mistake. And I said, what? And I said, well, I just got this thing from the penitentiary saying that was they had a voucher saying that they were going to pay expenses for a speaker. I said, that's not the way we do it. He said, oh, yeah, we do it like that all the time. I said, no, you don't. You used to do it like that. You don't do it like that with me. That deal's over. And we had an interesting conversation. We had a long conversation about the seventh tradition. He pleaded ignorance. I don't think he was quite as ignorant as he claimed to be, but he was pretty ignorant. And so we worked it out. And I worked out some way to get on an airplane with no wings or something to fly out there. It was talk about a jail cheapo. But we went. And it was okay, but it had a little bit of a stressful feel to it. Yeah, I mean, there's a climate. You can tell when you walk in. Nobody has to tell you. But it just didn't feel comfortable. And so we got her done. And about a year later, he called me and he said, now, Tom, listen to me before you say anything. He said, we want you to come back out here and do a rerun. You didn't do it right first time. And so they want you to come back out. And he said, now, we've got it right. We have got this thing fixed. I said, tell me about it. So he told me what they were doing. And I tell you that they did do it right. And what they did was, it's what I wanted to just show you, that it's about far more than money. It's about a lot more than money. And what happened, when I take this with me when I'm going to be even touching on traditions, because this was something that had great value to me. That first time I went out there, it was okay, but it was routine. You know what I mean? It's just sort of just a routine little deal. The next time I went out, it was a totally different place there. He sent me this. If any of you have ever been around an institution, this is called a withdrawal sheet. And what they did at the federal penitentiary was circulate a withdrawal sheet, and every member of the group who wanted to contribute to the expenses of what we were doing signed up in different amounts. Some of them wrote bad checks. Believe it or not, it made a contribution and had no money. But their tent was good. Their bank account wasn't very good. But they paid. And it was light years different, eh? I was the guest of those people. I wasn't some guy being shipped in here to preach to them. I was a guy and what happened, the three towns took care of the air travel, and the guys in the joint took care of the ground expenses of the hotel, a meal, whatever expenses we had. The guys took care of that. That's self-support, and that thing of just giving a welfare state, and then taking care of everything, it can be a great disservice, And I just wanted to share that one with you. That was one of the real payoffs for holding the ground and taking a look at that. So I keep it. And there's that voucher they sent me. Anyway, I don't even want to look at it. But something else, really, traditions truly are powerful. And then the ninth one is about bosses and stuff.
AA as such ought never be organized, but we may create service boards or committees directly responsible to those they serve.
Yeah. That's a while ago when we were doing the thing here, somebody asked people to identify that had helped put this on. That's leadership. These things don't just happen spontaneously. It just doesn't work that way, believe me, if you haven't been involved. And so somebody has to step forward, accept responsibility, and take care of business. And that way stuff happens. Without leadership, what you got is a crowd. with leadership, you can have an organized kind of a function that'll come off well. And nobody has to go to jail as a rule. As a rule, sometime, once in a while. If they do, we've decided it's Alex that has to go. Yeah. It's because we love him. And so the same thing in the program, that we don't have leadership per se, but we have service committees and these things directly responsible to those they serve. It's just like I said about my group. We have every service that's done in Alcoholics Anonymous done in our group. And they're responsible. Each one of these is an autonomous function in our group. They need no, like I'm on the corrections committee and also on the program committee, which plans the meetings ahead and all that kind of stuff, and speakers and all that. And those committees function autonomously. They elect their own leadership. They make all their decisions. They don't need approval from the larger group for anything unless they need something beyond their means. And if it needs some money or something, they'll bring it to the business meeting and we'll take care of it. But that's what that's about, is that group has the autonomy to operate in the interest of our common welfare. And so it's the same at any level. That we service committees like our intergroup office, this kind of a thing can come under that umbrella, where people they're hired employees, but they're hired at the same rate you would that if you had to hire somebody else. And so it's done that way. Our folk in the general service office, sometimes we forget, and when we're complaining about something today, hey, well, look at what they're doing in New York. They're not doing anything in New York. What they're doing in New York is serving as our staff. That's what they do. And each one of them has a desk where they're responsible for a particular function. And so that's what they do. They're not doing 12-step work. What they're doing are things that make the 12-step work, that makes the 12-step work. I'll give you a quick example on that. I got a call from a guy up there one day, and he asked me if I would work with a guy in Kenya and over in Africa. And I said, what do you mean? I said, now, if you're talking about going to Kenya, I'm not going to Kenya. If people shoot a lot over there, so I ain't going. He said, you don't have to do it. You can do it electronically. That he's good on email. He speaks better English than you, but you ain't saying much. And I said, okay, we'll tackle it. And this guy, I learned more about Kenya than I really wanted to know. But what I found out is that Kenya has 30 million people. 2 million of them live in Nairobi. 28 million live in God knows where, the rest of Kenya. And to round them up, it would take an awfully big roundup. And so he's concentrated in Nairobi, period. And so this fella, Michael's his name, is a marvelous fellow. And so he has some grit and some ambition. He wanted to get the program out. He wanted to do something in the correctional facility. He had a lot of interest in that. So he had a lot of folks locked up. He wanted to do something. So I had the real pleasure of helping that guy draft a plan. Yeah, when you start, it's amazing what you run into. When you start trying to draft a plan in a country where the average family lives on less than $1 a day, less than $1 a day, they're not going to have a lot to put into the basket. They're going to have very little. So they had problems, and so I told him, I said, tell me about your place. He said, ask me some questions. It'll make it a little easier. So I asked him the obvious questions to me. Where are the facilities? How far you got to travel to get there? What kind of resources do you have? Do you have any connections with the people? What about transportation? Do you have any cars? Money, stuff like that. I mean, just natural, logical information to see if you're going to start launching a plan. That's where I found out about the demographics of Kenya and the economic status. So it's a real challenge. And what we wound up doing is saying you're going to have to carpool. If you only got one car, let's pitch in. Everybody get 5 people, put them in the car. Everybody put in a little something you might be able to drive. It had to steal tires, too. They didn't have any tires. So anyway, it was an interesting challenge. But that's what our office does, I did the 12-step work. But somebody in the office that we employ to handle international affairs is the one who answered the phone and talked to Michael and said, they don't do service at the General Service Office. What they do is the administrative work so that could get funneled to the right person. And I was the guy with the short stick, so I got it. And what a great experience. I went over it, and one of the things that there's a little bit of a language problem. Michael wanted to do some public. I told him, I said, you need to do some public information and CPC work, like getting a cooperative relationship, and talking with folks and getting some interest. Well, he didn't quite understand what that meant, so he sent me a picture, big blown up picture, had 600 fellas sitting squatted on the yard of the prison, and Michael is up on some big platform making a speech. He thought the information was to tell the inmates. I said, no, you got to get the people who run the place, to have a little knowledge about the thing. So great fun working with that. And so that's, it's what happens, where our staff can do a good job, and then they'll get one of us to provide the service. That's exactly the way it's supposed to work. That's why we got people like. And sometimes we criticize the General Service for what they do. They're our staff, and what they do is provide the services we employ them to do. And so that's just kind of an important thing to me to know about tradition. So 10 is...
Alcoholics Anonymous has no opinion on outside issues. The AA name will never be drawn into public controversy.
Yeah. Let me refer to something that came up in the questions. It says people were talking about relationships of all kinds, and to me, this has an awful lot to do with relationships. This whole business about that we have no opinion on outside issues. I'm a little generous with that thing, and I like to think of outside issues are things that are none of my business within the fellowship. That you probably don't have this in Vancouver, but in some places in our country, like my area, we have the problem of real gossip, and that's all you can call it. That's it. And gossip is a dangerous thing. I have seen suicides as a result of gossip, where somebody's casually talking about stuff they got no business talking about. And this notion is more than a notion, it's an old principle that is often abused, that what happens in AA stays in AA. What you hear in AA stays in AA. It is not for street corner conversation. And to me, that's what this kind of thing means in that tradition, is that it means more than just how we communicate with the world. It's how we honor and respect each other's privacy. So I think gossip is very much a part of what's covered in that tradition. That and then the other is kind of obvious, but about having opinions on outside issues, and so gossip is an outside issue. That's the reason I bring that one up, and a dangerous one, a very dangerous one. Like any citizen, I have concerns that I want to deal with. But I've got to be careful that I speak as an individual and not represent myself as speaking on behalf of AA. One little illustration that I got really angry with our governor one time. Yeah, I know y'all don't ever get angry at your elected official, but I was just mad, because he just did some dumb stuff that in a way impacted on AA. And I flat didn't like it. And I supported this dude. I gave him money because I thought he was a good man. I was wrong. But he probably is a good man, but not in that job. And so he did some stuff that I just could not accept. So I wrote him a nice little letter that I guarantee he didn't show to his mama. And he answered it. No secretary would write a memo as ugly as that one. Not the wording, but the composition. That was amateurs. Well, I had to be very careful that while it related to dealing with alcoholics, I had to be very careful that I didn't give any kind of insinuation that I was speaking on behalf of Alcoholics Anonymous. I'm speaking as a tax-paying citizen, as somebody who voted for him on the belief that he would do something worthwhile. But it had to be careful with that. We had to be very careful that I simply don't have the right to speak on behalf of anybody else. And just because I feel strong about it doesn't mean other people do. I'll tell you one other place that I run into that a lot. I do a session at a law school, usually once a year, that's with third-year law students. They're getting ready to go practice, and they want to bring somebody in to talk about dealing with alcoholics in the court system, what attorneys can do. And so I go down and do that. Invariably, because you've seen I kind of like interactive stuff. Invariably, they'll ask me my position on legalizing marijuana, for example. Well, now I'm down there with full identification as an AA member. And as an AA member, I have absolutely no position on that. So I refuse to answer it. And they beat on me hard, trying to get me, but you see what the caution is. Because if I do that, in their minds, I'm speaking on behalf of our fellowship. And we don't have a position on that. And so I have to be very, very careful when I'm doing that thing. And you'll probably run into the same thing if you don't already. When you go out, just to let people assume that you're speaking on behalf of the fellowship. And so it's a tricky kind of an area. And so that 10 is that thing about operating within the context of who we are, what we're about. And have to be careful with that stuff. Yeah. 11.
Our public relations policy is based on attraction rather than promotion. We need always maintain personal anonymity at the level of press, radio, and films.
Yeah, that's exactly right. I think I mentioned in one of the earlier sessions that our program of attraction is us. We are the program of attraction. It's not, we do ads and all that kind of stuff, but I don't think that's the program of attraction. I think we attract people by the way we handle ourselves. Or we repel people by the way we handle ourselves. And we can do either one. We're quite capable of it. And a lot of times when we get casual and we get relaxed, and sometimes we'll forget that we've got people who are keenly aware of who we are. And oftentimes, I know at one time I had one of my bosses, a secretary of correction, and I were meeting in a corrections workshop, and we went over and had dinner, and the boss was really kind of a stern old dude, but he was in a jocular mood, and we were the manager came over and told me, he said, we're going to have to close this down a little bit over here. God knows you're running our customers off. Well, we weren't exactly a sterling example of decorum, that night. I wasn't real proud of that. And I'll tell you one time when I really had this brought home to me in a positive way. I had a bunch of guys that we were getting ready to put on a workshop at a district meeting. And so we met in the lobby of a hotel where one of our folks was staying, and we were meeting. Now, we had about a half dozen people, with me and 5 other people. We were going to be doing a panel. So we were going over this thing, getting our game plan together, what we're going to do and how we're going to do it and all that kind of stuff. And now I paid no attention, I don't think anybody else did in our bunch, to anything going on in the lobby. I had noticed at the next table, this is a good example. I noticed the next table, a white-haired couple, they were an older couple, were sitting there, and I noticed they kept cutting a look over there once in a while. So they got up, went over, checked out, and came back by, and they stopped at the table. And the lady was the bolder of the two. She said, we didn't intend to eavesdrop on what you guys are doing, but we were just curious, what are you doing? I said, well, we're going to be putting over a panel this afternoon, and we're sort of getting it together. And she said, oh, what's the panel about? I said, it's about service. And she said, well, that's nice. In relation to what? And I said, Alcoholics Anonymous. And she and her husband finally spoke up and said, oh, isn't that great? Yeah. And she said, the reason we noticed that, we are both people who have been highly engaged in all kinds of circles. You guys were the most intensely focused people either of us had ever seen. Now, that was a shining moment for Alcoholics Anonymous. Suppose we'd have been there just barking out dirty jokes and stuff like that, and that, it wouldn't have been much of a program of attraction, eh? Yeah, but I'll guarantee you, either one of those old folks would send their grandchildren to AA without hesitation. And so that's why I think it's just a matter. I don't think you have to be paranoid about stuff, but just a matter of being conscious that, particularly in small towns, people know you. Yeah, they know who you are. And then when they see that, we're going to be an example, good or bad. We'll be one or the other. We can't be neutral. And so it is an important thing in that program of attraction that we be very careful about how we handle ourselves and when we're dealing with people, to do it in an appropriate kind of way, to demonstrate the quality and integrity of what we're about. And so we got a lot. You got a lot of stuff at a program. I won't go into a bunch of it, but we get a lot of notoriety on television, and unfortunately, a lot of it creates a lot of dismay for me, because what's happened is that Alcoholics Anonymous, rather than public information, I never thought I'd see the day, but all too often Alcoholics Anonymous becomes the butt of jokes in late night comedy. And it's a tragic thing, that it's not their fault. It's up to us to help people understand differently than that. So we sort of get what we fail to sow in a way, but those are not things that attract people, but they're things that just happen. And so I hate to see that happen. You get stuff in papers that. We had a thing, and I know you have them here. In fact, you just had something in this city that's absolutely heartbreaking that had to do in a different venue, but it had to do with identifying people in ways that are tremendously injurious and just happen not far from where we sit. And so it's not isolated, this kind of thing. Whether that was related to anybody with alcoholism or whatever, I don't know. I haven't read it yet, but I just heard it. And we had a deal in North Carolina where boy meets girl on AA campus, and that's not newsworthy. It happens. And unfortunately, it doesn't always work out. And you had a case where a guy and a girl, this is what wound up in the paper, had apparently gotten involved, and they went out somewhere, and the guy murdered the girl and crushed her head with a rock. A brutal, well, there's no such thing as a gentle murder. But that was a brutal kind of a cold-hearted kind of a thing. Well, the newspaper just absolutely just blasted that, as they would. That's their job, for God's sakes. That's what they're paid. That's what they're paid for. The public has a right to know, and so they reported it, and it made it sound like that they met in AA, and the scheme was hatched there, that culminated with that. Now, I was really troubled about that. Troubled a great deal. Because what an image, eh? What an image. Now, how do you deal with it? And I was racking my brain trying to figure out, because what we have to recognize is, particularly when you're dealing with outside agencies, is that writers and editors, when they're going through journalism school, they learn nothing about anonymity in AA. It's not taught. So if we want them to understand that, it's us who has to carry that message, not depend on somebody else, because it simply won't happen. And so I was trying to figure out what to do. Writing an angry letter about that would have been adding coal to the fire. It would not have been an effective thing. And I just felt compelled to do something. But what could you do? Attack somebody for doing their job? I mean, they have to report this stuff as factually as they can. And so I was sweating over it, and about 2 weeks later, a writer on that same paper wrote an extremely sensitive article. It wasn't contradicting the other article, but he wrote a very sensitive article about a thing. I wrote a letter of commendation to that writer. Didn't mention the other letter. But gave the commendation for the proper reporting, and in that way may raise the level of sensitivity. But it's all we can do. I mean, you couldn't attack people for doing what they have to do. And if you have concerns about those kind of things, it's in our court. How do we get people to be more sensitive to that kind of stuff? Asking them is one simple way to do that. And so. Television people, all that kind of stuff, those are the public that we need to inform and help them understand the criticality of anonymity in early recovery. Very critically important, but they don't know it if we don't bother to tell them. I had a group of guys. I was doing a workshop in California with a bunch of old goats. I mean, they were old, and we were up on a piece of a mountain, and there's 4 guys came in from California, and they were just young guys out trying to have a good time. They were going up and down the coast harassing people, and it was harmless. You know, they were just out on a lark. And so they heard there were some old goats up on the mountain. They were AA guys. They heard there were some old goats up there. And so here they came. And they were just sort of goofing around. They were just trying to have a little fun. So they came in, and they kept throwing out a little stuff there, you know, trying to get a little humor, and all they hit was a stone wall. You know, we weren't buying any of that. So they finally gave up on, you know, trying to turn it into a party. And we weren't going to do that. You know, it's fine for you to have fun, but not at our expense. You know, we got work to do. And so they gave up on that. And then one of the guys spoke up. They were all from Hollywood, and he said, we'd really like to get into the discussion. He said, we've got an enormous problem, and everybody here knows it, that our people who are well-known celebrities are always in the press and on television exposing everything about their problems with alcohol, their attempt to do something about it, coming out of treatment. And sort of the spokesman for the group said, what can we do about it? And I said, well, you may be able to do something. I said, but you know what? I said, let me just ask you a question. Answer your question with a question. When was the last time anybody in Hollywood, California, met with the editor of the paper and talked about the sensitivity of anonymity for people in early recovery? Of course, you know the answer. Yeah, it was just a blank look. And okay, there's your point of action. If you care about that and you want something done, bother to go and have a talk with the editor, or manager, or whoever, and explain what this is. People don't know that. They don't know it. And so if we don't bother to let them know, who is? So I think this whole business of how you deal with that thing and let this program of attraction not turn into some sick joke on television. But that's us. And if we don't care, it'll keep happening. But I think it's very much the ball's in our court on that kind of thing. So that, to me, I mean, that's kind of a weak-sounding tradition, but when you think about it in that regard, an awful lot of people die trying to get in these doors, and they wind up in this just sort of bouncing ball thing. Yeah. So it's a pretty important kind of thing, I think. Yeah. And
anonymity is the spiritual foundation of all our traditions, ever reminding us to place principles before personality.
Anonymity is the spiritual foundation of all our traditions, every one of them about anonymity. You notice he didn't put the mic over here till I'm just about finished. He wants to amen, is all he wants over here. But that was about anonymity. And the real truth is that 12th tradition is not so much about secrecy, it's about humility. You know, so that we don't take a lot of credit for what we do. We don't need a lot of recognition. That's the real spirit of what that's about. A guy explained it one time in a meeting I was in. He said, humility is doing something for somebody and not letting them know it. That's a big test, too. It is a big test to do something and don't let them find out about it. That's what the humility and anonymity is about. Is getting down to that. And personally, I really believe that anonymity is something that we really bounce around in all kinds of directions. A personal kind of example. As you've gathered, I travel a lot. I fly more than pilots do. And my wife is thrilled about it, too, I can tell you. I don't know where we're going to get divorced. But if she has to go to Saskatchewan, she's going to stay with me. So, for years on planes, you know how it is. You sit down with somebody and you start talking. What's your dog's name and where'd your kids go to school and all this kind of stuff. Just chit-chat, yeah. And for many, many years, people would, obviously we're flying to Vancouver, but say, where are you going? I said, well, I thought I might go to Vancouver since that's where the plane's going. And so, but just brilliant questions like that. And then nearly always, for many years, the way I handle it is say, what are you going to do in Vancouver? And for years, I wouldn't lie. I would just sort of put a little smoke screen on it. I'd say, oh, I'm going there to a retreat. And oh, is that right? What's it about? And I said, oh, it's about troubled families and individuals and problems. And I just sort of fog it that way. And it dawned on me one time, what on earth am I doing, for God's sakes? But I'm up here in a metal pipe, blasting through the air, 30, 40,000 feet in the air. Don't tell anybody, God Almighty. What has that got to do with anonymity, for God's sakes? That is the dumbest thing. And when it finally dawned on me, what are you doing, my friend? That's stupid. It's either fear or pride. That's all. That's all. Either fear or pride. And so I thought about that, and I said, I'm not going to do that anymore. And I haven't. I tell you, if people want to know where I'm going, I'll tell them. And if they want to know what I'm doing, I'll tell them. In no uncertain terms. And if they're not careful, I'll tell them a whole lot. But it is stupid that here I am. It couldn't be more isolated, for God's sake. Good chance might not even get back. And I'm going to, don't tell anybody. Jesus. That anonymity is not intended to be a prison, And so I just right now, if somebody asks me, I've got enough sense to know when you're boring somebody. But I tell you what, and I've been doing it now for probably 35 or 40 years. I have never had one single person who was less than eagerly interested. Not a single one who ever said, oh, that's nice. Not a single one. Because almost everybody has one in their tree somewhere. And so at the time I say that, and say, well, I've been wanting to ask somebody. So get into, it's amazing what happens. I found an awful lot of alcoholics in hiding. And I found an awful lot of Al-Anons. I got on a plane one day and was sitting with a rather well-nourished lady from Iowa. And she's a big girl. And so we went through the routine, and she, where you going? I told her. And she said, what for? And I said, a conference. She said, what kind? I said, AA. And I noticed she sort of cut a look at me when I said that. And so I was waiting for the next punch. And she said, I used to be an Al-Anon. And I said, why'd you quit? She said, well, my husband died. And said, I just kind of drifted away. Now, I know this is going to be shocking to you, but she married another alcoholic. That's hard to accommodate, but she did. She married another alcoholic. And she said, that sucker won't let me go to Al-Anon. And I said, why not? She said, well, I don't know why not. He drank something to it, says he's afraid I'll make him quit or something. And so he won't do it. She said, but you know what I'm going to do? I said, what, girl? And she said, I'm going to go home, and if that sucker tries to stop me, I'm going to knock him out. I said, get him, girl. But see, what anonymity, what it could have robbed, inappropriate secrets. That's not what it's about. I want to be open and be helpful to people if I can. And, if I can't, I'll leave them alone, But by God, it's just tremendous reward. I'll tell you just a couple more stories, like bedtime stories, and then we got to, we'll be all right. It's just fascinating to me about, how when you're free and you can just sort of engage with people and not just sort of paranoid looking hide and stay. I was on a plane I was going from Chicago to Fargo, North Dakota in February. What a thrill. I thought, God knows, good speakers are in Brazil or somewhere. I'm going to Fargo, North Dakota. And so I get on the plane, and there's a young woman sitting by the window, and I had the middle seat for some reason. And so I sat down, and we just started to chat a little and asked those same inane questions, like, where are you going, Fargo? Where are you going, Fargo? And I asked her why she was going to Fargo. And she said, I want to relocate, and there's a job for a librarian, and that's what I do. So I'm going there to interview for a job as a librarian in Fargo. I said, well, that's good. I wish you well with that thing. And she said, well, where are you going? And I said, I'm Fargo. What for? I said, going to a conference. What time? AA. And she didn't say anything. She was very interested in that. And she said, geez, that's really great. And then about the time she and I had concluded that, I looked up the aisle, and we were just about loaded, and there was a frantic-looking, red-haired woman coming down the aisle. And I said, uh-oh, I bet that's mine. She's coming to me, I can tell. She had that frantic look. And so sure enough, here she came, sat down. Went through the same litany. Her name was Kit, and she was from Providence, Rhode Island. And went through the routine, both going to Fargo. And she, I said, now she had a very tragic situation. Her husband had just died of brain cancer, and she was going to Fargo, where her family lived for a grief period. And so it was a very tragic case. And she said, why are you going to Fargo? And I said, I'm going to a conference. What kind? AA. Well, you'd have thought I'd hit her with 220. I mean, she said, are you in recovery? I said, you better believe it, girl. You better believe it. She said, me too, 7 years. I said, how about that? Well, now we don't mean to be rude, but sometimes, I mean, my God, that was like magnets, And so she and I just started really having a semi-closed meeting. You could only hear it about half the plane. So we were having a great time and just getting ready to get in, and it dawned on me that I was as rude as could be to the girl that I was talking with. And so I turned around to her and I said, I apologize for that. I said, my God, we got started and then I got caught up in what we're doing. And I just totally ignored you, and I apologize for that. She said, no, don't apologize. Everybody's got this. He said, I didn't tell you the whole story. And she said, I am going to Fargo, and I am going to interview for a job, but it's not because of trying to advance my career. She said, I was to be married last Saturday. And I went to the church, and I was dressed in my gown, and I went down there, and my husband-to-be didn't show up. Well, can you imagine the humiliation? It's just mind-boggling. And so she told me about that. And she said, don't you dare apologize for what you and this lady were talking about, because that's what I didn't tell you. And the reason I'm going to Fargo is not to look for a job. It's to see if there's hope for me. And she said, after listening to you two, man, is there ever hope for me? So, you see, just a simple little thing. Yeah, we could have been there stony and got shut down and missed a marvelous opportunity to be helpful to somebody. There's no possible way to do any harm. And how many times have I deprived myself of that privilege by getting behind this little notion of don't tell anybody. It's not anonymity. Not at all. It is either pride or fear that'll cause it. And so I just have a really great time in doing that kind of stuff. And there's absolutely no violation. The violation is hiding when there's no reason to. And so being open and being up here, I can't tell you how many times that has happened. I'm talking hundreds, not a few. I'm talking hundreds of times that sort of a thing has happened. I'll tell you one more, and then that's a quick one. But I was flying one time, and we were coming into land somewhere, and I noticed a guy beside me. You know white knuckling. I mean, this guy had a death grip on those handles. And I mean, you could tell that he was not having a good time. And so he's gripping those things. I thought, do I act like I don't see him, not run the risk of embarrassing him, or do I just go ahead and barge in? I said, I chose the latter. And I said, tough, ain't it? He said, the guy just came unglued. He said, my God, mister, you don't know how bad it is. He said, I fly for a living. I'm a salesman. I have to fly. There's no other way I can get by. And he said, every time they take off and land, I am so terrified I don't know what to do. Now, I think just coloring the truth a little bit is okay if it's for spiritual purpose. And so I said to him, you know, I had that problem one time. I didn't tell him. It lasted about 10 seconds and was over and never again. I didn't tell him that part. He didn't have to know the whole story. And when I told him that, he said, my God, what'd you do? And I said, well, I'm in a program, and we have a simple little prayer that just works for me beautifully. And he said, what's the prayer? And so I recited the Serenity Prayer to him. And that's like every salesman, he had a pad in his pocket. So he said, wait a minute. He got that pad out. He said, tell me that again. And so he wrote down, transcribed the Serenity Prayer. Now, what's the harm, eh? Yeah, what's the harm? Now, whether it'll do any good, who knows? But at least he didn't get some cold, stony dude sitting over there paying no attention. You got somebody that was attentive and tried to be helpful. There's no loss in that for anybody. And so the whole thing of what I'm dealing with right now is that thing that anonymity is not about fearful hiding. It's about protecting against that ego. It's about putting myself up so that I've got to be notarized, being notorious or stuff like that. But it's not about secrecy. It's that thing of being able to not take credit and all this kind of stuff. So it's not intended to be a jail. It's intended just to protect me from myself. So, as fast as I could go. Yeah. Anybody want to comment or anything before we say adios? It's bedtime. We have a girl in our group, but she never had chaired before, and she got up. I guess she thought she was at home with her kids or something. She got up in front of the group, they're going to lead the Serenity Prayer. She said, close your eyes. So everybody closed their eyes, and then we started to pray. So, whatever, it didn't hurt anything. So, good stuff. I hope you like going through this kind of thing, because it really is a dimension of recovery that I think is just enormously important. A lot of time we treat traditions like it's hard work. It isn't. It's about this thing of being able to live in harmony and effectively with the world around us. That's what it's about. And we don't have to live in fear and in hiding. We really can just reach out and engage. So good to see you. I hope you'll have a good night. I can't wait to get on my absolutely wonderful bed. And I hope you'll have a good night too. See you in the morning. Take care.
Thank you, John.